I am just completely delighted to be here with my great friend Barack Lurie, who it seems I've known you forever, Barack. Barack is also on the board of the American Freedom Alliance, which makes me extremely happy. His counsel is invaluable. He's been part of AFA, in fact, since longer than I have, which is quite something. I've known him for all this time, and the American Freedom Alliance has done a number of events featuring his various books. Barack, you're an attorney, but I know you mostly through your books, your writings, your podcast, your radio. You've had me on a number of times, your podcast and your radio show. Um, and the topic that, generally speaking, you've been focused on is atheism. And as I recall, you you had been an atheist, a staunch believer, insofar as one is a believer in atheism, and set out to do research to support and buttress your beliefs in the face of crazy believers, religious people, and found that they were right, and you were everything to do
Wrong.
with atheism, you were wrong. And then you turned it into, you've been very committed to fighting against the secularism and what atheism does. So tell us about how
Yes.
that journey happened.
Well, look, I mean, I had been brought up to believe that the mantra that you hear all the time that religion has caused more deaths and mayhem than anything else in history. And it sounds like a nice little quip. And somehow it's an equation that must ring true because everyone says it. But I decided that if that's the case, then I want to prove it. And when I was in college, I decided to write my thesis exactly on that point and to prove how deadly and how awful religion was, especially organized religion. You can be as spiritual as you want, but at the end of the day, it's actually destructive. That was my thesis. And as I went about proving my point, and I put that in air quotes, I realized that I was just so wildly off. In fact, the numbers of death and mayhem that atheism has caused, godlessness has caused, is far, far greater than anything that you could attribute to religion. So, in fact, if anything, it's amazing how few deaths and mayhem and torture and such resulted from religion. Over 2,000 plus years, 3,000 plus years, you would think that there'd be a lot more, but it's got a pretty good track record, all in all. And I was quite impressed by that. And then I couldn't deny the numbers. And so once I realized that, I began to wonder why that was the case. And I began to understand that from probabilities and otherwise that there must be a God, particularly a creator of the universe who gives me free will and my sense of consciousness. And once I realized that you cannot have free will and consciousness if you actually believe in those things, and I do, then you must believe in a creator. I'm not saying that that creator has to be the God of the Bible, but I know that there's a creator. This is what I always say, Karen. I know that there's a creator. I believe that that creator is the God of the Bible. So that was a wondrous moment for me, very challenging in many ways. I often say that the moment that I realized that, I remember going down the hallway to some very religious folks that I knew, and I had always politely argued and debated with over the years. I have to respect myself for that. I think I really handled myself quite well, and they were very nice too. And I remember going to see them to tell them that I believed in God after all. And as I was doing so, the weight in my legs became extraordinary. It's as if gravity suddenly increased by 10 times. I didn't know why I was so having trouble walking down that hallway. I almost thought I was having a stroke or something. It was weird. And I realized now that the reason why I was feeling that, Karen, was because I realized that it was not just changing my favorite color from purple to yellow or whatever, or changing my favorite team from the Dallas Cowboys to the Steelers or something. It was that everything was changing in my life. All of a sudden now, it's not just that I now believe in something, it's also that it has dramatic ramifications. I was suddenly going to be accountable for all of my actions. It meant something. If you believe that there's a creator, then you have to also believe that there's accountability and free will and such, and I'm responsible for my actions. That was a very huge event in my life, and I just can't forget it, obviously. So I then pursued my thesis, completely reversed everything, and I said that I became a staunch apologizer for religion, and defended it, and showed how evil atheism was. It was quite a turnabout for me. And I suppose, I've been doing that ever since, Karen. I have decided that this is my calling. Somehow God has decided that this was my path, and I just can't help myself. I don't know. A musician has music in his blood, and he has to produce music. An artist has to produce art, and I just have to do this. I have to be the one that shows not that God exists, although I think, of course, I always love talking about the reasons why God is real, but I have to show the dangers of a world without God. That apparently is my mission. And it is the thing that I get super excited about. I can't wait to talk about that. And I often wonder, why is it the case? So it's because God has infused a want in me. Not a talent necessarily, by the way. It's a want. We've talked about this before. Like you and I love French, right?
Yes.
I decided to speak French when I was 12 because I wanted to speak it. I just had this passion for it. And for some reason, God infused that want in me. It's not that I have a talent for languages. It's just I had to speak it perfectly. And when you have that passion, you want to get under the rocks and with a microscope of everything. And why is it that the grammar is exactly this way? And I wanted to. I corrected the teacher sometimes. I wasn't annoying. I corrected the teacher where I responded a certain way, and she said, "That is correct, Barak." And then I realized, no, that was not correct. And shouldn't we be using the subjunctive tense, for example? And she says, come to think of it, you're right about that. You were wrong, and now you're right. So it's not, again, not that I'm a genius, not that I have a talent or anything else like that. It's just that I had a want. And this desire to showcase how evil godlessness is, how destructive it is. It's not just the lack of a belief and what's the big deal. There really are consequences that flow from being an atheist. And for that matter, abandoning the notion of any God whatsoever, you don't have to be an active atheist to know that you're being destructive. So if I can give an example or two, if you decide that you're one of these people that's just, look, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. I don't want to go to church. I don't want to go to synagogue. All that stuff is kind of nonsense for me. Maybe there's a God, maybe. I don't know, and I don't care. Let's say you have that attitude. Okay, it's almost the same as being an atheist, because if you don't know and you don't care and you don't, advance yourself into that arena, you'll end up buying all sorts of nonsense, particularly the global warming nonsense, the natalism nonsense, meaning that's the notion that we shouldn't even be here on the planet. It's best to depopulate completely, not just have fewer children, but to depopulate, and with the goal eventually of having no humans on the planet whatsoever. You'll believe in this sort of nonsense. You'll also believe in the denial of marriage, the denial of monogamy, that all these things are nonsense. What's wrong with having sexual relationships with 5 different people in some sort of quintuple thing? Some of them gay, some of them not gay. It's all good, sort of thing. So these are highly destructive, whether they realize it or not. And so as I pursue my path toward fighting atheism, the more I realized how atheism is destructive and even kills on so many levels of all the things that we value, whether that's morality, our sense of truth, our sense of justice, our sense of beauty, our notion of free will, our notion of civilization, generally speaking. All these things go away if you do not seriously activate God in your life. And I've I think I've proven that in my books, Atheism Kills and Atheism Destroys, and now I'm working on finalizing Atheism Steals. That's my last of the four books, three books rather, my trilogy. And it is very well documented, very well referenced, and it will. It's challenging for the atheist, because for them to appreciate how destructive it is and to actually become a believer, they ultimately will start having the same weight in their legs that I had when I discovered that God was real. It's asking a lot for somebody to believe in God. It's going to change their entire mindset. It's, I would say, 10 times more difficult, easily 10 times more difficult, maybe 100 times more difficult than an alcoholic giving up alcohol, a gambler giving up gambling, a sexual addiction guy deciding to settle down with one woman. That's how hard it is. So that is the challenge, and we're really going up a very momentous hill. But nevertheless, truth is truth, Karen, and you have to acknowledge it. So there's a form of laziness with atheism that we are competing against. It's not just, like I said, changing from the Dallas Cowboys to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's really a momentous decision you must make if you're going to have a meaningful life, and for that matter, a meaningful civilization.
But I was going to say, when you brought up the weight that you yourself felt, um, which, and by the way, with the French teacher and all of this, you have such a deep commitment, not just a passion to do something, but a commitment to it and a commitment to the truth. So he also put this on you. But as far as walking down that hall with your legs getting heavier, realizing the momentousness and how your life was now completely different in every way. For atheists, which you had been up until that cusp of a moment, isn't there, in part, this clinging to atheism is in part a clinging to what appears to be an easier life? And you said it's harder on the one hand, but on the other hand, isn't it easier to live with constraints in your life at a certain point? Isn't it easier to have sort of a guidebook rather than and standards and mores and I guess rules to live by that will contribute to a better life for you and a better society? The transition is very difficult, but on the other side, isn't it, with the constraints, isn't it an easier life or not?
Well, you and I agree with all those things that you just said, that believing in God and having the constraints in your life through the Ten Commandments and the other mitzvot of the Torah are all very important. And it does make you a happier person. It makes you a more productive person. It makes you, I think, a better parent, a better brother, and a better member of civilization, generally speaking. But that is hard for the atheist to accept. They will say, "How so?" And then you have to, the only way to respond to it is by saying, "Well, read Baruch Lurie's Atheism Kills series, and maybe you'll get a handle on this." But they really believe that they are happier. They perceive themselves to be more productive. That they are not limited by the constraints, the silly constraints that you impose upon them, and therefore they are free to explore and wonder and become inquisitive about science and the stars and the heavens, and not heaven per se, but you get the idea, about science and exploring, and will be free from the shackles that religion has imposed on us. That's the way they think, and I know because that's the way I used to think. They believe that the religion is a form of numbing your brain, so that you can't. It's a drug, so to speak, that tells you the lie that somehow you are going to go to this place called heaven if only you do these things that we demand of you and that you believe these things. And the atheists, cannot abide. They don't feel like that is consistent with their view of reality. They feel it's hypocritical. The universe is cold and dark and harsh, but gosh golly, that's the reality, and we need to roll up our sleeves and make this world a better place for that. The only problem with that argument is that as much as they pat themselves on the back of being so scientific and seeking, improvements for civilization, they do none of those things. They are not inquisitive. They do not seek out science. They do not improve civilization whatsoever. If anything, I think I proved this very well in Atheism Destroys, in particular, and now upcoming with Atheism Steals. Atheism, one of my main arguments is atheism has really produced nothing. It's very hard to find a scientist who's an avowed atheist who you can say, well, gosh golly, this man really, or this woman did amazing things, believing that there was no God, and that's the reason why he pursued science. By contrast, it is the believers, and this is a shocking thing for a lot of people. They can't understand this, that the atheists, that believers are really the ones who gave us all of our great moments in science, all of them. So even Einstein, to some extent, I mean, he was not necessarily an avowed believer, but he did believe in a form of spiritual higher being. And he regretted not having really studied dramatically the Torah when he was much younger, because he felt his life would be richer and that he would have a better sense for his scientific pursuits. As amazing as he was, as a genius as he was. But almost everything else that you can think of scientifically, Newton laws of gravity, oh my gosh, Copernicus, even Galileo, all of them were avowed religious folks. And we can talk about Galileo in a moment, and I know everyone's yelling. But nevertheless, he was very religious, despite the narrative that they try to impose upon him. Copernicus, same thing. Mendel, Gregory Mendel, who did so much on genetics and splicing and such. The Genome Project, done by Francis Collins. All of these were very deeply religious people who sought their scientific study in the pursuit of God. And my favorite one, the most important one, in my opinion, is the Belgian monk who discovered the Big Bang. This is what's his name? Oh shoot, I can't remember. But anyway, a Belgian monk, and he happened to decide that there must be a beginning to the universe. Georges Lemaitre, that's what his name was. Georges Lemaitre, a Belgian monk, and he had it out with Einstein, because Einstein's own theory of relativity demanded that there was a beginning to the universe. And Lemaitre looked at the Torah and said, well, it says in the beginning there was such and such and so on. And that means that there was a beginning to the cosmos. And up to that point, everyone had believed that the universe was static. Most scientists believed that. All atheist scientists believed that. They wanted to believe it for their own reasons. We can get to that too. But Georges Lemaitre says, no, there is a beginning. And because he knew that there was a beginning, he sought to discover it. It's a very interesting thing. You will not find something that you're not looking for, right? If you're not looking for your keys, you're not going to find it, right? So you don't know that you've lost something, right? I mean, let's say I know that there's $500,000 somewhere in my house. Okay, I've been told that. Okay, I'm going to start looking for it. Okay, all I know is that it's there. Okay, somewhere in my house. I'm going to look for it. But if I don't know that, then I'll never stumble on it. I mean, maybe it's somewhere hidden in the walls. I'll never find it. But that was the attitude of most atheist scientists. And Georges Lemaitre says, no, there's $500,000 somewhere in this house, so to speak. And so he went about finding it. And because he went about finding it, he found it. And people mocked him for pursuing this. They thought it was ridiculous what his search was, but he ended up being right. They mocked him and they called his theory, oh, you and your Big Bang theory. But in fact, it was a very apt description. Yeah, it was actually a mockery of his thesis. But that name stuck because it was actually a fairly accurate one. And to this day, people don't really give credit to Georges Lemaitre the way they should. So Georges Lemaitre presented this to Einstein. And Einstein was a scientist who actually wanted to believe that the universe was static and always was static. And so upon seeing this, Einstein was quite upset. And he said, you know, your conclusion is correct, but your mathematics are atrocious. That's the famous line that he said about it. Uh, but in the end, Einstein had to agree with Lemaitre, and he said it was his biggest mistake that he didn't agree with Lemaitre on the beginning of the universe. He had actually so wanted a static universe, Einstein, that he actually inserted something called a universal constant in his theory of relativity in order to avoid the possibility that there was a beginning to the universe. That's how badly he wanted it. He did not seek out truth. Atheists do not seek out truth. I want to make that super clear. If you do, you will become a believer. You will know that there's a God. But they tell themselves lies that you and I know transparently are lies. One of them being because I came to believing in God because of my belief in free will. But they believe, because they know that that's a big problem for them, they believe, therefore, that there is no free will. Everything we do is a product of some random billiard ball that has struck us before and has struck that billiard bar before, and so on. We are simply, whatever we do, we don't realize that we're actually compelled to do by some previous action. We have no free will. And therefore, that the prisons should all be, opened, and all prisoners should be let. You can't help them. So that's the way it should be. It's what A Clockwork Orange is all about, that movie. So I believe in free will. You believe in free will. It's obvious. It's transparent. We are responsible for our actions. And if you don't believe in free will, then you are not responsible for your actions. It's that basic. So I also recognize that there's consciousness. I'm the me in me, right? You are the you in you. The reason why artificial intelligence will never have consciousness is because, well, it'll never have consciousness. That's the bottom line. It is God-given, and we know that. We have that internal sense that you can't create that, ever. You can mimic consciousness. You can make it appear as if you're talking to a real person. But that AI operating system or robot, whatever it might be, does not have the consciousness that you have. And that is an obvious fact as well. To say nothing of the obvious fact that the only art can be produced by humans. Only music could really be generated with the creativity that humans have. Only humor comes from God, and so on. So we can create it by artificial intelligence. Yes, that's absolutely right. But that's because humans are creating it at the end of the day. Dogs do not appreciate these things. Whales do not appreciate this. They might kind of hear it, but they can't create it. We are creative beings. We have a sense of civilization. We have a sense of the past and the future. These are all things that the atheists can't seem to acknowledge. So these are facts on the ground that they just are not willing to believe. And that's really, my embarrassment is that I didn't see these things right up front. But I'm glad I saw them when I was young enough. I mean, I was 21 when I started believing in God. So I'm always so shocked, and Karen, I think, I don't know how to put it. When I hear somebody who's 31, 40, 50, 60, who still is an atheist, I always marvel at them. Like, really? You don't ask yourself questions? Like, why is it, for example, that we humans love art, that we appreciate a sunset? When was the last time Rover and Fido, sat down looking at a sunset, marveling at how beautiful it was? Really, I'd like to see that. When, right? When was it that they had a sense of art or music, or when was it that they had a sense of storytelling? When did a leopard sitting on a branch on a tree say, "Here I sit, just like my pappy before me, and his pappy before him," right? No, of course not. There was no sense of connection to the past. And they don't ask these inquisitive questions, like Georges Lemaitre did, as to the beginning of the universe. So Einstein, as brilliant as he was, showed that inability to get past his need for no God. that's what's happening. People, it's not that they don't believe in God. This is a very important aspect of it. And then I'll turn it back to you, of course. But I want people to understand it's not that you don't believe in God, it's that you don't want to believe in God. Okay? That is a very serious and very powerful, very important epiphany that you need to make about why you don't believe in God.
So much of that, it's so. I have many responses to all of this. So much of this, it seems, if you're an atheist, you cling possibly to this idea that you are free now to not be free at all. You are free to the whims of of these vagaries of the world because you don't have free will. So you have this peculiar sort of freedom, which the opposite of tautological, it undermines freedom in itself, but it allows you to be a victim, which is it's difficult. At one time we thought it was a difficult thing, but it's so much easier than to be accountable to something or even to one's own self, that I am responsible for my life, for what I do. I have free agency. All of that comes with, the weight that you felt walking down the hall. All of that comes with this. It's a burden, and yet that is where the freedom comes from. Self-agency is freedom, and it is
That is true
freeing,
freedom.
right? But they cling to this idea that they are like the billiard ball, and therefore whatever bad thing happens, they can't feel shame because it wasn't them, but nor can they really take on a sense of accomplishment because it can't be their accomplishment either. Right? And so we have both of those things. We can fail and we recognize it and say, "Oh, I made a mistake. I'm going to do better next time." Or we have remorse, we have shame, we have guilt. But being the humans that we try to be, I want to do better next time. And at the same time, then I can feel accomplishment for having learned. If you're a devout atheist, and I use those together deliberately, you can't feel either of those really, can you?
No, you can't. And one of the ironies is that these same people who don't believe in free will, or at least they shouldn't believe in free will if they're a true atheist, they claim to believe in freedom. Like, but wait, there is no freedom without free will. And that is just a simple equation that you have to understand. You can't do things freely if you don't have free will. This is why, very interestingly, and then every parent knows this, or every good parent should know this, that kids do appreciate the constraints that you impose upon them. You tell them, look, you cannot eat candy all day long. You cannot go stay up all night long as well. You have to go to sleep. You have to go to school. These are things that actually make kids happy. And if you let them go and to do whatever they want, and you can call that freedom. Hey, there you go. There's your freedom. They will become miserable little creatures. They'll be brats. They'll be awful young people. They won't appreciate and show respect to other people as well. They will be miserable people. So that, by the way, that extends to adulthood. It doesn't change just because you've now grown out of childhood. It'll be exactly the same thing. Everyone who is miserable in their lives, who has dramatic depression in their lives, I would say 99.9% of them. You can't never say 100%, of course. But most people who are truly depressed, who have just miserable lives, don't have a sense of purpose in their lives, they tend to really lack God. And look, they can say, well, I know somebody who believes in God and they're still depressed. Well, there's believing in God and there's believing in God. There's the richness of believing God. Some people believe in God the way that other people believe in exercise. You can believe in exercise or you can do exercise, right? So, uh, believing is a verb. It's not just something that is. And I always say God is a verb. So it's great to believe in God. Now get to God, find God, do God's work, figure out what God wants from you, and when you do that, you do become much happier. You have a sense of purpose. You are not depressed. This is the way things. That's the reality. I don't know that you can truly have a meaningful life without God. When I confront people with this very issue, they don't like it. They get angry about it. What are you talking about? I have meaning in my life. Well, then I say, well, why is meaning even important to you? I mean, a dog doesn't have meaning. A dog has a sense of survival. It just wants to get fed. It wants to sleep. It wants to chase other dogs. It wants to chase rabbits. I get that. But there's no meaning for a dog's life. And he's not programmed to have meaning. He doesn't have free will and the sense of freedom that we do. He's perfectly happy to be put on a leash. He's thrilled. In fact, he'll give you the leash if he could to say, walk me. That's the reality. We are not dogs. We are not mammals, just mere animals, rather. We are humans, and we need God, and that's the way it works. And it's the best medicine you could possibly offer anybody who has suicidal tendencies or depression. Anything else, if you go to a therapist and that therapist doesn't believe in God, and simply tries to help them in their own ways and try to find ways to be happy, you might have minor improvements. But in order to truly be happy, you have to infuse God in your life. It is the only way, and the only way for civilization to continue. So these are the things that you're talking about. Yes, I agree with you, Karen, 100%. You can only be happy with these constraints, with this sense of justice and sense of truth, a sense of shame and honor. And the best way to prove that, what you just said, Karen, is to imagine a world where there is no justice, no sense of truth. Everyone has their own truth. There's no sense of honor. There's no sense of shame. A criminal is no less significant than somebody who's an upstanding citizen who always follows the rules. They're just one and the same, and therefore we need to let them out of the prisons. What kind of world? What's going to happen as a result of that? We'll all live in a world of fear. We won't seek accomplishment because pride and in the sense of honor, of achieving something great, well, that will mean nothing because there is no honor if there's no shame, right? We have to have shame in order to propel our civilization forward. That helps us understand the path forward. It's like a bowling ball going down the lane, right? There are gutters for that, right? And if your ball falls in the gutter, well, you don't get a point. It's as simple as that. And the way to get a strike, to get the points, is to make sure you go down that path without the gutters. This is a first-time Baruch Lurie metaphor, by the way. I want to make that clear. So
stay out of the gutter. Stay out of the gutter.
Yeah, stay out of the gutter. But now we have a world, to continue on with my metaphor, where they want to just have the bumpers on the gutters, so that you never ever have to worry about the gutters, and you can just throw the ball willy-nilly, and maybe it'll get some more points anyway. The gutters are a form of shame, right? And that's the better way to put it. And they take that out. Therefore, you will definitely get a point. If you take out the gutters, as long as there is momentum to the ball, you're going to get a point, at least one.
Right? Religion is, in a sense, the bumper that keeps you out of the gutter.
Right. Well, but religion shows you the path to keeping the ball through.
Right.
And that's, you're cheating if you use the bumpers. That's the bottom line, right? I mean, it's fun for kids, and I get that. But if you're an adult and you're using the bumpers and you expect people to applaud you when you get a point or two, because you knock down a couple of pins, that is embarrassing for you. But you don't pretend that somehow you've achieved something great, even if it's a strike, especially if it bounces off the gutter. So this is what we're facing here, and it's about happiness. People don't want to acknowledge it. You can show them study after study that religious people have much more purpose in their lives, much more meaning in their lives, tend to be much more successful in their relationships with other people as well, have healthier lives in so many different ways, have far reduced forms of cancer and heart attacks and otherwise, and just have much more meaning and purpose in everything else, and help advance civilization. You can show them all those things, and then they would say, well, I don't know about that.
Right.
But I just showed you.
Right.
And they lead lives where they don't have kids. Maybe they have one kid. And oftentimes that one kid is lost himself because the parent never really gave any instruction about the purpose of having God in their lives. Um, and I often ask atheist parents if they have a kid, I say, why did you even have this kid? Why? And Karen, it is something that each one of us believers needs to talk to our atheist parents, friends, and ask them, why did you have a kid? It is stunning to see the responses of these atheists. And so they've never thought about the question. They never asked themselves, yeah, well, why did we have this kid? Why? Because you think about it, kids are very much of a risky proposition. You spend. I mean, first of all, they may not. They may have some sort of sickness. They may have a deformity. They may have all sorts of issues. It's so many things that you have to now kind of power through. Maybe they have ADHD and so on. They might have some sort of mental issue or illness. Now all of a sudden you have to take care of that, but even if they're perfectly healthy, you have to deal with monsters under the bed. You have to deal with bullies. You have to deal with all sorts of perceived worries that are silly. You have to challenge the principal because they're not teaching your kid right, or whatever it might be, and to say nothing of the tuition, to feed them, to clothe them.
The expense is tremendous.
Yeah, yeah, and you can't go to vacation. You have less nookie with your wife. I mean, there's a lot of things that kids are very problematic. And for what reason? Why? Why? What is the great payoff at the end? What? That they might hate you. You hear so many stories of kids that absolutely despise their parents and don't talk to them anymore. Won't even let their parents see their grandchildren if they even have grandchildren. And so why? Why have kids? And I'm telling you, the atheist parents very often will turn to me and say, I didn't think about that. In one case, I talked to a couple that had a little boy, and they were holding them in a Bjorn at the park. And I got to be friendly with them because I had my little boy, and he was playing, a little bit older. And I turned to them, and I asked that question, why? Can I ask you a question? Why did you have this kid? And the woman, bouncing her baby in the Bjorn, turned to her husband, and she said, yeah, Charlie, why did we have this kid? And I felt terrible about it because it suddenly had a big explosion of an epiphany in their head. Like, why did we do this? Because we had this feeling we had to, or because everyone else does it? Is that the reason why? But now people are beginning to say to themselves, there's no point in having children. They
That's right.
want their independence. They want their freedom. The kids cost money. Kids are expensive. Like, that's the only calculus, only analysis in terms of having a kid. So only rich people can have kid. It's weird. It's a weird dynamic. And you and I know that the reason why you have kids is because it's both a joy, because God makes it a joy for you, and an obligation, because God makes it an obligation. Those are the two things. It's a carrot and stick. Like, I want you to be fruitful and multiply. That is what God wants. He wants us to at least replace ourselves with 2 kids, and preferably a lot more. And that's we actually do need that. We need people to have 6 kids, 8 kids. I always say I wish I had 6 kids myself. I have 3, and my wife now regrets not going for a 4th. But at least we have 3. I couldn't be happier with my 3 kids. But the bottom line is that we have kids because God wants us to have kids. These are the things that atheists don't ask themselves, and they don't necessarily kind of think ahead is this thing good for civilization? Is what I believe good for civilization? And then one final point I'll make on this, and of course we can talk about other things, but I think, very often you have to judge yourself based upon the company you keep. You judge a people based upon the company they keep or the accomplishments that they've made. So looking at Syria, for example, Lebanon, looking at Iraq, Iran, and so on, look at the mayhem that they've offered the world. They offer terrorism. That's what they offer. They've offered virtually nothing in the way of inventions and progress to the world. Islam, as much as we have to recognize it as a valid religion and such, the reality is that Islam has really produced very little in the way of inventions. People talk about the numeric system and such like that. It's not quite accurate, by the way.
Yes.
But even if it was totally responsible for the invention of what we now call Arabic numerals, uh, okay, what have you done for us lately? I mean that's the point, and you have to ask, the company you keep, what are you offering the world? Right now, what's the expression? Not all Muslims are terrorists, but virtually all terrorists are Muslim. And this is not an attack upon Islam in and of itself. I'm simply saying that's what people think. So when you hear a terrorist explosion or hear news of it, you think, okay, Muslim. There's something going on there. There are many exceptions, but I'm simply saying that by and large, there's a 90% chance that you'd be right to say, well, there's something Muslim originating out of this terrorist attack. And so you wouldn't necessarily be proud of it. Likewise, with atheism, you have to ask, uh, is atheism producing anything? Is it offering anything good? Is it creating more damage than any purported benefits? What are the benefits? What are the damages? I think I've established the damages dramatically. It has offered only horrific killings, godlessness in particular. So, look, the atheists will bark back at me and say, nobody died in the name of atheism. Actually, yes, they did. Uh, it was called World War II,
Uh-huh.
and it was called communism. And on steroids. I mean, unbelievably so. The godlessness, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said about communism, godlessness is the central pivot of communism. That is the core of it. Communism cannot work without atheism, and he made that very clear. And he's far brighter than I am, than all of us are, and he lived under it, under the Gulag Archipelago, and he knows this is the central tenet, and they hated Christians, they hated Jews, precisely because it offered a world where the state was not in charge, and that somehow it was above the state. So communism requires everyone to be on board, and therefore that's why it killed millions of people. It's as simple as that. You're not on board with the communist agenda, you're going to die. That's the way it works. Whereas with democracy, which is what God loves freedom of the people.
Mhm.
The voice of the people is the highest form of truth. And that is what democracy is all about. And we allow people to live their different ways of belief and different desires, and therefore we thrive. That's the way it works. We are a God-centered community. That's why America works so well. But once you take away God from the American experiment, bad things will happen. And we're seeing that already. So, yes, nobody died officially in the name of atheism, but they definitely died in the name of atheist-fueled enterprises called fascism and communism.
Here we are in 2025, having been through the 4 years of, quote, Biden-Harris regime, and prior to that, Obama, and decades of virulent secularization, virulent um, turning away, rejection of Judeo-Christian values, and even our Judeo-Christian, our churches and our synagogues are being undermined, which is a whole nother thing. And the removal of God from everywhere, the removal of the very notion that we're Judeo-Christian has been really a key element of leftist Democrat policies, to a really horrifying extent. I mean, there's the whole lie of the wall between church and state, which
Right. It
was
is a lie.
never right. That was in a letter. It's not embodied in any of our documents. In fact, all the founding documents are very insistent and very clear that we are founded by a creator and endowed by him with these inalienable rights and so on, and our Constitution is protecting them, not giving them to us. But we've come very far from that, to the extent that so many people I talk to and you talk to really think that we were born out of some kind of secular, it was a secular birth. It was not founded on any religion. We should remain secular. We should be at least atheist. And we've seen what taking God out of the schools has done, and so on and so forth. Is your feeling now, perhaps with Trump back in office, are we reverting maybe a little bit back to bringing God back? Let me also just add it in this mix, because we don't have much time. We talk about there's some sort of a divide between politics and culture. Politics are downstream from culture, but I'm increasingly seeing that they're all swimming in the same swamp. What the left has done has politicized every aspect of culture. But I don't think, as you can't really separate those, so too can you really not separate our religious life from our cultural life. Is that fair to say? You can't parse these things out. It's all of a piece. What's your take
Right.
on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. To my metaphor that I often use, it's like people are flying in an airplane, and now they're cruising at an altitude of 20,000 feet, and then they say, here we are, we're flying just fine. What do we need an engine for? Right? What do we need? They forgot that the engine and the wings and everything else were the things that got them up there in the first place.
Huh.
And so that is very much the attitude that atheists will have. They think that everything that we have in civilization can just hum along fine without the engine, as it were, of God. But God is what brought us here in the first place. God is what led to our sense of freedom, our sense of free speech, our sense of justice and truth, and all the things that I mentioned in Atheism Destroys. And family, for that matter. All these taboos that we inherently know that are evil, like incest, for example, like pedophilia, like rape as a spoil of war, for example. And there's so many other taboos and wrong things. That all stems from our love of God, the God's infusion into our civilization. And without it, you'll revert back to not only incest, but bestiality. I mean, all sorts of horrific things will start happening. And it's already happening now. I mean, in my new book, Atheism Steals, I talk about an uncomfortable subject, and that is bestiality. And I talked about incest, which is also a very uncomfortable subject in Atheism Destroys. And here's the thing. You have to ask yourself, why is incest wrong? Why? And I go through that litany and I talk about it. And then what I ask in Atheism Steals is, why is bestiality wrong? I mean, you and I know why it's wrong, because God said so, first of all. And there should be a distinction between humans and animals, and they should not be meeting in that sort of way. But now we're talking about people who want to marry their pets. And that's okay. And if they don't want to marry them, they want to live with them, and they're totally fine with them, and those pets are their best friends. And the only ones that they trust. It's not bestiality per se, but it's a sense of this meshing, a confusion of humanizing animals that just is not warranted. And I say this, by the way, as a vegan. I love animals, but not in that way. I mean, I understand that the animals are animals and humans are humans, and humans are. I'm vegan for health reasons, not because anything else. In fact, I'm not being cruel. Not contributing to cruelty to animals. That's great. I'm happy about that. But I'm not a crazy person. I do it for health reasons. The point is, getting away from that, the bestiality thing is a very interesting animal, so to speak. Pardon my pun. I'm simply saying, and I present this case of this woman. Her name was Denise Frazier, and in America, and she decided that it would be just great to have sex with her 2 male dogs. And she began to just have sex with them all the time. And this is not the same as a human man, having sex with female dogs, because in that situation you can say that there's coercion and it's cruelty to animals. But here she is, the passive one. The dogs are being the active ones. I mean, she's not raping them in the same sense, right? It's not a question of consent, because obviously the dogs are fine with it, right? It's an ugly topic to discuss, but you have to ask, why is it? And she felt so good about it that she actually posted about it online. And she even took videos of it because people are taking videos of their sexual activities anyway. And you're shaking your head, and understandably so. But when she was arrested, and she was arrested, she had this look like, what was wrong with this? I didn't hurt anybody. And in a way, she was right. What was wrong with it? And the police who arrested her said this is the most horrific thing that they've seen, most disgusting, depraved thing that they've ever seen. But they were asked, why do you say that? And they weren't able to answer the question either. So, and I present this. I say, why is it that she was wrong at all? And because her look of confusion was, well, what's wrong with this? She was never taught that bestiality was wrong. So from a standpoint, if you were born on an island with no sense of the Torah, no sense of the Bible, no sense of God at all, and there were other people there, but there were also animals there, and you wanted to have sex with them, it wouldn't be considered taboo. It would be fine. The reason why it's taboo is because God said, don't do this. And it's part of our mother's milk. That's in the DNA of our civilization. That's why. And even the atheist knows that that's bad, but he doesn't know why it's bad. He can't answer the question. Just like they can't even answer why they have kids. They can't. So this is the problem with atheism. They don't delve into asking, why are things the way they are? Why are the rules the way they are? Why do I have the sense of injustice the way that I do? And why do I have a sense of a taboo the way that I do? So this woman, of course, is now in jail, but even the judge doesn't seem to understand why. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with this? I mean, it's a fascinating moment in our time. And these are more recent things that are happening. This happened in 2023, mm-hmm. that she was arrested. But I don't know that you would find similar situations in 1990, 1980, and before. I think there's kind of a tipping point that we've reached where, and I think you alluded to it, where not only is religion kind of pushed to the side, there's a contempt toward religion that is new. They will arrest people much more passionately if they are religious. So, for example, the people who are protesting in front of an abortion clinic, even though they might be 200 yards away and they're not interfering with anybody, they're simply posting a sign, they go to jail. Whereas if you protest and smash windows at a BLM riot, a so-called protest, well, then you were just protesting, and it was free speech. It's all good, and insurance will take care of everything. Likewise, we saw that with the COVID shutdown, how they treated churches, yes. And said that you can't keep them open, but strip joints were fine. I mean, that was, to me, that was an essential business somehow, compared to what churches offer. Whereas you and I believe that spirituality is the ultimate essential service. So that's what we're facing. And your question is, are we getting back to more of a sense of God? And I think we are. I think President Trump, I should say, is very appreciative of Christianity and Judaism.
Yes.
That is the reason why he supports Israel so well. That's why he meets with Orthodox Jews and evangelical Christians and considers them very big friends and supports them in legislation and otherwise. I think he gets it. I think he's gotten God in his life, in the past decade or so. I think that God is watching over him. I think God has had a hand in this recent election, helping people understand that this is an important country, and what America does is essential for the success of civilization and God's role in it. He's not about to abandon us. And I think that's very much a part of the reason why God, I think, helped in the election. Call me crazy about that, but I think there's too many factors involved, too many currents against Trump, and somehow he survived them all. It's really a delightful turnabout, and I think that's the fight that we ultimately have, godlessness versus God.
I'm just going to throw in, to me, I agree with every single word you've just said. The election showed that God still believes us worthy of his intervention in keeping us here. But also, to me, the date that will stand out for me forever is July 13th, the day of the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt. And on that
Yes.
day is when I knew we were going to be okay in November. I literally had zero concern at that point. We were shown, and I believe President Trump also knew in that moment, he said as much. He was saved on that day in order to make America great
Yeah,
again.
that's
And
right.
so he really did take on the position of, and the burden of him doing the things that he needs to do, because that burden was laid on his shoulders in the most extraordinary visible way. And I remember thinking, we just saw a miracle. We just were witness to a miracle, and it's an extraordinary thing. And it is God versus godlessness, and the left seems to cling to godlessness. And in large part, I think what we see when we see people being red pilled or coming over, in large part, they are also taking on a recognition that one needs God in one's life.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, there's no other way. You simply cannot be happy in a meaningful way. And you can be happy by the sense of going onto the amusement parks and watching
It's
movies time
entertainment.
and time
Yeah,
again,
it's not the same.
having a lot of sex with a lot of different people, I guess. But that it'll just be happiness for the moment. The thrill of an orgasm or the thrill of a ride on a roller coaster. But that's not happiness. That's just fun at best. But to have true meaning in life, this is the way. And the answer is so clear there. I mean, one of the things that I always challenge people on, and I challenge the atheist on, after I tell them about Georges Lemaitre and Einstein, on the other hand, are you going to be like Georges Lemaitre, seeking
Mhm.
out the realities that are right before you? Or are you going to be like Einstein, as smart as he is, who will deny the realities and, in fact, try to force a fit to conform with what he wants to be a reality? Which of the two will you be?
Great note to end on, Barack. I did want to ask you book recommendations, if you have any. But also,
Yes.
yeah, do you have book recommendations? I know yours, "Atheism Destroys, Atheism Kills, and Now Atheism Steals," as well as "Rise of the Sex Machines," which is completely fabulous, and I think we're seeing the rise
Thanks.
increasingly.
Yeah, I've been proven right about
Those,
this.
or do you have others
Now
you'd
those
like to
relationships.
recommend?
Yeah, for sure. My books. Among my books, please read the Atheism Kill series. It really does inform you very well about. I think it'll bolster your sense of love of God, and we do need that. It's not enough to just believe. It's also good to know why you should believe. So that's an important aspect, and those books will tell it to you. My book on keeping the kids all right, which is my most recent book, is a great primer for parents who want to keep their kids conservative and also believers in God. It will definitely, I guarantee you, if you do what this book suggests that you will have no problems with your kids. They will love you. They will love God. They'll love America. They'll love Israel. They'll love Christianity and Judaism and show tremendous respect for it. It's a guarantee. And people seem to be really adopting it. Grandparents are buying it for their parents, for the parents. By the way, it's very interesting. I've noticed that. The other books that are not of my writing that I really recommend as well. My favorite nonfiction book is The Science of God by Gerald Schroeder, who's a neurophysicist in Israel, PhD, and a brilliant, brilliant man. And he goes about showing how science proves that God is real, and actually takes the Torah, the Bible, and shows that all the science that is referenced in the Bible is accurate. There's nothing that is wrong about what it says. For example, the Bible never says, that the Earth is flat, right? You would expect that at some point, right? But it's not. It says it's round. It talks about the beginning of the universe, and shockingly, it describes the arrival of all the animals, right? But we now know from paleontology that that's exactly
The
the
order.
order with which the animals arrived on the planet. It's fascinating. Like, what are the odds that these, these fakers who wrote the Bible, this crazy Bible, got it right? It's just amazing. But these are the things that these are the realities. So anyway, The Science of God is a fantastic book. It really will blow your mind, and it totally destroys the theory of evolution as well. It's a good read. The fiction, the other nonfiction book that I would recommend is it's an eye opener. It has not necessarily anything to do with God, but a beautiful book is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
Really, that was a game changer for me. I really opened up my eyes on a lot of different issues, and whether he realizes it or not, he's actually invoking a lot of God without appreciating the challenges there. And then finally, a fiction book that I think is the best book ever written, and it actually did change me to become a believer, and that is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's my favorite book of all time. I guarantee you will love it. It is the most impressive work of fiction I think ever written, even more so than Hamlet, which is also a great work of art. But The Brothers Karamazov is indeed the best argument for God that I've ever read. It will make you cry in the end, so be prepared. Even if you're a man, you will cry if you understand this story. And a challenge for anybody who does read that book, because it's a murder mystery. People don't realize it, but it's ultimately a murder mystery. Which one of the four brothers killed their father? I'm not giving a spoiler, right? I'm just saying that's the premise of the book. Which one of these brothers killed the father? Who did it? And most people who don't read it well will answer one way, and people who do read it really well will figure it out. It's a fascinating thing. And if you figure it out, then you believe in God. It's awesome. So please read that book as well. Those are the books that I recommend. There are many others, of course, but those three books, I really have had a lasting impact on me, and it really is very informed. So get yourself informed and find God yourself. This is your job. Really, I think God wants us to find Him. He doesn't just reveal Himself. That would be too lazy on our part. He expects us to work for God.
Right.
As I say, God is a verb. So.
And your website is baracklurie.com, and you have this, all the books are there, your series, your video series, your courses, everything. So I highly recommend people go visit that website. Barack, thank you so much. What a real joy this has been. I hope we do this again very soon. A real pleasure. Thank you.
I hope so too. Thank you for your great work.
Thank you.